All right, I figured out how to start the recording. So let's get started. Today we are going to talk about adding our own REST endpoints into Sugar. Um, there are many reasons why we would want to do this, mostly for adding new functionality into the tool, whether that is to try and communicate to a third-party web service or some other reason. What I'm going to do is I am going to create the ability to provide SMS functionality directly into Sugar. There are a number of different SMS companies that are out there. Um, Nexmo, Twilio, Plivo, and I am going to go ahead and take a look at how I built a add-on to be able to send a text message from Sugar and be able to send it to a mobile device. This is the first part, which is adding the REST endpoint. Over the next several months, what we're going to do is we're going to take all the stuff that we have done over the past 7 or 8 months, and we're going to all put it together. What we're going to be able to do is create a custom module. We're going to add some dashlets. We're going to add a custom field. And in the end, what we're going to be able to do is from directly within Sugar, have the ability to easily send a text message to one of your prospects or contacts, and have that message stored directly inside of Sugar, and have the message also be available for reporting and all of that type of stuff. So I'm going to go through the basics of our presentation here. So as you know from being on the presentations in the past, this is a monthly webinar that is geared towards developers and or administrative resources. This month's is strictly developer. The next several months will also be geared towards developers and more of the framework of how to do work inside of Sugar. The goal is to have everybody have successful implementations of their Sugar client and to be able to go from there. Oh, somebody said they should be able to see something, so let me make sure I'm sharing my screen here. All right, so yes, you should be able to see my screen. So hopefully you can see it now. The Tycomics is a SugarCRM advanced partner. I started um, with Nepo Systems, and we were acquired by Tycomics a little bit over a year ago. We were the 2014 Rising Star. As a company, we do consulting, development, and support. You can learn more about Tycomics and our CRM group at tycomicscrm.com. Please follow us when you get a chance at Tycomics CRM and Tycomics Inc. on Twitter. And so if you have questions along the way, please pop them into the question panel. I will have to look at those questions as they come in. I don't have any helpers this month to help me. So please let me know if you have any questions along the way. A little bit about me. I have been doing SugarCRM development since version 4.0A. At that time, I was the director of engineering of a voice-enabled CRM, which used SugarCRM as its platform and Asterisk as its backend. And everything was enabled inside of the CRM, so you never had to leave the CRM for screen pops and outbound calling. So we're going to do some of those similar types of things over the next few months, mostly around SMS and adding custom modules. Most recently, I was the Chief Technology Officer of Nepo Systems. We did everything from sales, support, and consulting and custom coding for SugarCRM. I am currently the CRM evangelist for Tycomics, and my goal and my role is to bring everybody up to speed on how to do development in the SugarCRM area, and try to get as many SugarCRM developers out there in the world. You can reach out to me at any time that you want by reaching out to me on Twitter at Bickart, or you can touch base with me on LinkedIn. So mostly what we're going to talk about today is where we do our development and adding our instance. So somebody else said they still can't see my screen. So can you please confirm that you can or cannot see my screen? Okay, so somebody's indicating they can see me. Okay, so where do we do our development in Sugar? We do all of our work in the custom directory. After we build our customizations and we do a quick repair and rebuild, the items end up back into um, the cache directory. The cache directory is a compiled version of all the things that came from all of our extensions and all of our modules, and they end up in the cache directory. Sugar actually runs most of the application, at least from the UI perspective, and any of the compiled code from the cache directory. So if you add customizations and extensions to things like vardefs to modules, they end up in the cache directory, and that's where Sugar actually runs the modules. We also have the data directory, which is where things like the sugar bean and all of the relationship information comes from. We also have we also have the modules directory, which is where all of our tabs along the tops of the screen belong. Things like accounts, contacts, and any custom modules that we also create. The include directory has a lot of information about how to communicate and do controlling of lots of other parts of the system. The vendor directory is where third-party extensions are added, things like PHP Mailer, Zend, things that Sugar does not create itself. Is where the third-party customizations go. Sidecar directory is from version 7. That is the new user interface that is capable of controlling all of the new UI. Most of it is JavaScript code. So please take a look at it when you have a chance. So many customizations that you make end up in the custom directory. Please don't make changes to things like data and include. Those are not upgrade safe. You want to make sure all of your customizations end up in the custom directory. You also end up with things like the modules directory. When you build a custom module, Sugar places the custom module code into the modules directory. So that is also a place where you could end up with some custom code. Just don't change any of the out-of-the-box code going forward. So what we're going to talk about today is adding a REST endpoint. We could talk about a little bit about modifying existing REST endpoints and places that you can make customizations. I don't have an example that I have worked on for today to discuss that. So we're just going to talk about adding a REST endpoint. So I'm going to drop out of that, and I'm going to talk about what it is that we're going to be doing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new endpoint that will show up inside of Sugar. We are going to go ahead and make it so that we can create that endpoint and be able to test it. I'm going to use a variety of different tools to be able to build this and be able to make it so that we can have access to everything. Any of the code that I will have available will be posted into GitHub. So please feel free to fork it, download it, contribute to it, whatever it is that you need to do. So I had a choice of being able to set up and work with a variety of different SMS vendors. I decided that I would try a new one, Plivo, and be able to go ahead and see what it is that I could do with their code. So I signed up for a free developer account on plivo.com. They gave me, I can't remember, maybe $5 worth of credits. I can make calls. I can make send SMSs. I can use text to speech, all of the different things that are available inside of their capabilities. Then from there, I started looking at their APIs and said, well, what is it that I can build from their APIs? I'm interested in just sending an SMS. What I would eventually like to do is within Sugar, when I'm on a contact or a lead or any person type record that has the ability to have a mobile phone number, I would like to take that phone number and be able to turn it into something that I can actually send it to. So I need, from inside of Sugar, I need an API to be able to communicate to this third-party website. I need to understand from that API, how do I actually communicate, and go ahead and build something that will communicate, or search and see if there's something that already exists, so I don't have to build something from scratch. In my particular case, there was something that actually existed that was a Plivo PHP written by the people at Plivo. I decided that, I want to learn something new, so I started building my own endpoint so that I can learn to build, a custom endpoint to talk to a third-party system. I then, use their API documentation to be able to understand it. So I started on their API documentation, and I'll just go back to the root of the documentation. So inside Plivo, they provide a really detailed document that describes how to communicate. They talk about how do I talk to their default URL, and they only send HTTPS communication. Essentially what happens is I send an API call, Plivo does whatever it's supposed to do, and it returns back some result information back to my data. So I happen to be interested in the messaging, and so I actually want to send a message. I actually built out a little bit more than that, and their API essentially tells me that I need to talk to this API, the auth key, which I'll show you in 1 second after you sign up for your account, and then you want to send a message, and then they have a number of parameters that are required, and they talk about a specific type of formatting that they want to be able to handle. They have a message, and you can send up to 1,000 bytes of UTF-8 code. So essentially, I can send a big, long message, and what will happen is Plivo will split it for me. I don't have to do any logic to say, hey, this phone's not going to be able to accept anything more than 160 characters. So they'll do it for me. I can also, as part of my code, send a return URL, and what it'll do is it'll return information back as a status to my call. So at some point in the future, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to add a module that's actually going to store what happens when we send and receive SMS messages. So I can actually respond, and what will happen is in my code, it'll actually send a message into Sugar, and Sugar then can use advanced workflows or regular workflows to send out notifications to a particular user. We can actually send up responses out of Sugar. So say, for example, you were using or have talked to a radio station, and someone says send in PIX, and you want a response, so we can set up a workflow out of Sugar that if somebody sends a SMS of the letter PIX to our number, I can actually set a workflow out of Sugar to be able to send a response to that. And we're going to work on building all of that stuff over the next couple months. But for right now, our interest is more into how do we send this message. As I said, inside of here, they actually ask for our auth ID. There's also inside of here, when we send our request, there's actually 2 things that we need to send according to their documentation. We need to do some authentication. And you'll see right here, it says that they are authenticating with basic auth, and we have to pass in our auth ID and our auth token. So some of the parts when we're designing our application inside of Sugar is, what is it that we should do inside of Sugar to be able to store this information? Do we expect each user to pass the auth ID and the auth token every time that they use our tool? I say no, we're going to store this information once because it's most likely not going to change. And then what we're going to do is also inside of Plivo, they also have the ability to have multiple different phone numbers, but I'm guessing that we're always going to send our responses from the same phone number, or we're going to send it from our special 6-digit code. So we're going to take that information and we're going to store that inside of Sugar, and we're going to talk about how we store that so we can actually get access to it, and make it nice and simple so that the user has a nice administrative capability, and they don't have to go and edit a bunch of files, because who wants to edit a bunch of files? We want a nice UI to do that. So one of the things it talks about is our dashboard. I'll go back to my dashboard. On here, it provides me some information about my auth ID, and it also provides me my auth token, which I can show. Normally it's hidden. And those are two pieces of information that I need as part of my API call so that I can actually send the information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a section inside of Sugar where I can actually store this information so that I can access it at some point in the future and use it for my API. The other part that is in here is I have a phone number that I'm going to be able to get information from, and I can actually have different phone numbers for different areas of say the United States. I can buy a number. I can buy a one of those 6-digit numbers so that I can have a vanity number instead of using all of the items that are on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about I'm going to jump over to Sugar, and I'm going to talk about how I built my little section to store the login information. So I'm going to head over to admin and head down to connectors. And inside the connectors area, there are 4 panels. The only one that I'm really concerned with is the set connector properties. And so I'm going to go onto set connector properties, and I added a new section for Plivo. And in here, I collect the information that I am interested in. I need the auth ID, the auth token, and the source phone number. You'll notice that for those of you that are outside of the United States, I am only using information inside. I am formatting this for the United States. We certainly could format this for other places, and based off of where, say, a person's phone number would be, I could actually do some formatting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But to add this panel, we're going to jump over to the source code inside of Sugar, and I'm going to close all my windows here. And what I did was I went into custom custom modules. And in here, we want to go into the connectors module, and the source belongs into the sources directory, and then we're going to add an extension for REST, and we're going to add a Plivo extension. And in here, we need a minimum of 3 files and a language file. So the initial file that we need is that we need to indicate that we are creating a Plivo class. And in here, the only things that I'm really telling it is that I have some fields that I am wanting to make sure that are required. So I'm going to indicate that I want the auth ID to be required, the auth token to be required, and the source phone number to be required. Other than that, I actually have turned everything else off. So remember when we saw those different 4 panels, I'm actually turning them off. We actually said we have no testing. We're not going to show up in any of the wizards. We're not going to show up in mapping, and we're not going to show up in the other admin screen that is there. So I actually turned off all of the other screens. So if I could jump back over to Sugar and I go to connector settings, I've actually turned off the mapping, I turned off the searching, and I turned off the enable connectors. So Plivo doesn't show up in any of these sections, and I'll show you really quickly. You'll see there's no ability for Plivo to appear. I've turned them all off. The only place that it shows up is in this section. So the next thing I need is I need a config file. The config file indicates what the names of my variables are. So you'll notice that I have auth ID, auth token, and source phone. Those are the required variables. I must define them inside of my config file. My name also must be shown. The order indicates which order of the tab. So I basically gave it a high number, so it showed up last. If I gave that a lower number, it showed up earlier in the tabs. I also have some var defs that are required. I have the var def that indicates that I have an ID and that I have a name, because Sugar uses the var defs to be able to handle different things. I also have a language file that defines what's going to show up. I have the ability to add a license file, which would show up in the upper section here. I did not include a license. So essentially I have the Plivo name and the names of my fields. So you'll see that it says auth ID, auth token, and phone number. Let's say I want phone number to be all uppercase like everything else. I can make it all uppercase. And if I reload this screen, which I just hit reload, it'll take it a little while to start reloading. Okay, so once I go back to here, you'll see that now everything is all uppercase instead of lowercase. If I blank out the values in this screen, in the config file, oops, and I reload, you'll see that the data in here matches. It's, it's actually what's in there. So the data is what's actually going in and out of that file. So that gives me a good place to start of what it is that I now want to be able to do. All I basically built that for was the ability to make it so that I can store information. So the next thing that I want to be able to do is have the ability to communicate to my third-party web service. And so I actually built an external API to Plivo. So one of the things that I did was I actually built inside of my tool, I have the ability to have a third-party web service to communicate to Plivo, and I built a package and it's on GitHub. So I'm actually going to go onto my terminal here, and I'm going to actually install my composer, and it's going to download all of the stuff that is part of my repository. And this is available to anybody, so that you can please feel free to download and take a look at it. We can look at it on GitHub if you're interested. I'm going to look at it inside of Sugar or inside of PHP Storm just because it's easier for me. So I'm going to take this, close that, and you'll notice that a vendor directory got added, and I added a number of other things that I'm using in my tool. The big one is I'm using Guzzle to be able to do all of my remote web service communication. So I went in and I actually created in here something called the Plivo service. You'll notice that I am using namespaces. It's really up to you how you would want to build your particular web service. So I used namespaces so that it's easier to know that my Plivo versus somebody else's Plivo. And so I created in my Plivo service as part of when I create it, I need the auth ID, I need the token. If you do it wrong, it'll give you an error. I have a static function to do stuff. And then I have the ability to make my calls. I have a number of APIs that are available. I have my messaging API, so it has the ability to send a message. And in it, it includes a number of variables that are required: the source number, the destination number, the message that you're trying to send, what type of message you're sending. There's only one choice, which is SMS. Your return URL and how the information should be returned to your return URL, whether it's a post or a put, and whether or not the phone number that you're sending should be logged. So once I've built this, I'm basically sending to my message. And you'll remember that when we built our code, we included in here that our base API, which was api.plivo.com/v1/account. And so as part of my code, I indicate how it's going to generate my URL, and it's going to generate my URL, and it's going to include that information as part of my code, so that it sends all of that information so that it sends correctly. So I built all of this. It's all freely available. You can play with it to your heart's content. And again, like I said, please feel free to provide additional feedback. So the other part that I did after I built all of that is I built an external capability that it basically allows, because I stored all of this information in the extension to the connectors, I actually have the ability to get the information out of the connectors and be able to get the information for my auth ID, my auth token, and my source phone. I also have the ability to create, what I did was I created a ability to get to the log, so I can actually easily log something if I'm interested. I created a reference to my service, which again is Bickart Plivo service, and I said, here's my auth ID and my auth token. So anytime this external API gets set up, it's all pre-ready. The other thing that I did was Google has a library called live phone number. One of the things with dealing with phone numbers, it's a big pain in the behind when people provide phone numbers and you want it to be formatted correctly. You know, I don't care whether the phone number is stored in, you know, with parentheses or dashes or dots or spaces or whatever. I don't want to deal with that. If you remember in the API, it actually specified that it needed to be, here, let's go back to the API. When I looked at the API, it actually says in here, I actually need the destination. All phone numbers must include the country code, the area code, and the phone number without spaces or dashes. So I need an ability to reformat that phone number. So I am using a existing library, live phone number, that'll actually handle that for me. That was in my composer.json, so that you can deal with it. It automatically reformats the phone number. So it comes in, and once it gets here, it takes my information, and I have the ability to send a message. And the only things that I need for my external API, because I already have my auth ID, my auth token, and my source phone, is I need a destination phone number and I need a message. You know, so what is it that I want to send to somebody? So I am going to send. I'm going to take the phone number. I'm going to turn it into a US phone number. I'm going to make sure that it's a valid phone number. I'm going to format it correctly, and then I'm going to use my service and I'm going to send to my source phone number. I'm going to reformat the phone number into the correct format, and then I'm going to send a message. So one of the things I probably should do is I should probably format the source phone number in the correct format. I'm going to skip that for now. And we're going to go ahead and test this. So I created a test program. So I created a simple test program. And in here, I am actually going to, because I am using an external API, I'm actually going to tell it to use the external API factory. I'm going to load my API of Plivo, and I am going to then use that API to send a message. So and I'm going to send this to my phone number. I'm going to run my little program here. And what will happen is I get a return, and it says I sent it to this phone number, +1 703 303 4511. It reformatted my phone number, even though I did it in this format. And it sent it to my phone. It says the phone number was queued, and it will send it to my phone in a second here. And so in here, I received the message. This is a live webinar. I can change the message to anything that I'd be interested in. So that you know that I am not tricking. I could change this message to whatever it is that I'm interested in. One of the things I notice is that it's actually printing out something. So I actually want to get rid of that printout. And let's try that again. You'll see again that I received another message. This is the power hour. So, you know, it's a live message. So the next thing that I want the ability to do is make it so that I can create this and use it as a REST endpoint instead of from a test program. So there's some important questions and thoughts that you need to think about anytime you're going to build your endpoint. If you are building an endpoint that is going to be extending a module, your API for that endpoint should end up in that module. So if I'm building a API for contacts, it makes the most sense to put it into the contacts directory. It doesn't make a bunch of sense to put it into the root base level. So again, you want to think about where you want to put your API so people can find them logically. I built a root level API. And so I went in and I went to custom clients base API. and I created a Send SMS API. We'll make this bigger here. And in here, I extended the base class of Sugar API so that I indicated that it's an API. I created an array that for my register API REST, and I indicate where I want to send this information. So I created, I must tell it what type of message I want. I want a post. I have a path. I'm going to say SMS send. I am going to have some variables that I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass 2 variables into my function. I have the name of a function called send message. I indicate that I have some help that's going to appear on the single line on the REST screen. And then I have a file that is used for the long help that I can put in any customization of code. So I went in and I created custom include external API help send message. Here's some basic information that is in here. It should be something that makes sense to the end user on how to use your API, not some simple little message. You can also have some additional things. You can actually indicate that no login is required. So let's say you want to build an API that accepts data much like you did in Sugar 6 for a way to enter data into your system and not require a login. So let's say you built a portal on your website and you need the ability to get the data back into Sugar. You can make it so that no login is required. You can also do things with the session and indicate whether you want the session to stay or not stay alive or to stay alive forever. So it really depends on how you want to handle that. So once I took my message, I'm going to send my message. It's going to call my function send message. And in here, I need two variables, the API from Sugar, as well as the arguments that are getting sent. I am actually going to indicate that I'm going to require the destination phone number and the message. And then I'm going to, again, call my external API, and I'm going to send my message, sending the phone number and the message, and I'm going to return the results back to the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to compile Sugar. So I'm going to go into Sugar. If you'll notice, I also added a couple easy things for me to be able to get to different things. So I'm going to do a quick repair and rebuild. And this makes it easier so that I don't have to go to admin, repair, quick repair, and rebuild. It's just a shortcut that I have added. Certainly can explain how that's added in a blog post in the future, or post that also on GitHub. So please let me know separately if that's what you're interested in. So once I did that, I now can head on over to the /rest/v10/help page. And what you'll see in here, once this reloads, what you'll see in here is that I now have a new function called post, and it's an SMS send, calls the function send message, and it sends an SMS. Again, this is where I should include some detailed information, and you'll see here's my long help file that says send message details go here, and there's not a whole bunch of details that I provided. What you'd really want is something that makes more sense. That would be more like this, that tells you what it is that you're trying to pass, how you're trying to pass it, all of that type of stuff. I, of course, was lazy and did the least amount of work possible. So again, I have my SMS send. So the next thing I need the ability to do is actually test this. I didn't actually build anything into Sugar to utilize this service yet, but I need the ability to test this. So I'm going to use an add-on to Chrome, a Chrome extension called REST Console. And in here, the first thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and get a token. So I use my API, which points to my local instance of Sugar, and I go to REST v10 OAuth token. So if I go back to here and I look for token, all right, so here's what it's asking for. It's actually telling me I need to specify the grant type, the client ID, the client secret, the username, the password, and the platform. And it gives me some examples, and it tells me here's what will be returned to me. So I'm actually going to go right on over here, It has my, I want a I'm looking for a password. It's a Sugar client. I have no secret. I have a username, a password, and I actually provided a platform that I'm using is Plivo, so I don't log anybody else out. I'm going to post this. And when I post this, I get a response back, and the response back gives me a token. So I need this token in order to be able to do the next thing, which is actually test my logic. So I'm going to go over to another console. And this time I'm going to go and I'm going to say, not that, I'm going to say SMS, and I'm going to send it. And as part of this, I need to indicate some information in my header. I need to pass along in my header an OAuth token, and that token is that number that I just copied from my login. And in here, I am going to, in my SMS send, remember I need to pass a destination phone number, and a message. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post this. Okay. And in response, I get a API response. I get a message that says the message is queued, and I get the user or the UUID of the message that was sent. If I go check my phone over here, I get the does the REST console, which makes no sense, but that gives you the idea. So next, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to use some of our additional APIs to get data back from Plivo. So I'm going to go back over to Sugar, and I'm going to actually say, okay, I want another message. And in here, I want to, instead of sending a message, I want to get details about a message. So I'm just going to copy this big block here. And I'm going to say get SMS message. And in here, I am actually going to say, instead of this, let's get. And I think I want to say, and of course, I have not tested any of this. So we are going to say, check to see if I can get this to work on the first try. So we're going to say get message. And we're going to have a function called get message. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to So the first thing that we're going to do is, because this is brand new, we're going to see if I actually got this to appear inside of Sugar. So we're going to go back and we're going to do our repair. We'll do it the long way, admin, repair, quick repair and rebuild. And while that rebuilds, we're going to say we want to know what we want is to provide an ID, and we actually want to provide is this ID right here, and we want to get that message information from Plivo and get details about it. So we're going to go and see if we can get that. So we actually have, so let's go look in here. So once I built my thing, I actually have a new SMS, and I could see that I have an error. It should say, it should have the ID instead of just /SMS, because I need to pass in the ID. So I'm going to go look real quick on one of the core modules, and let's say I want to go to include API, and I want the I actually want client base API, and I want to look at, say, the module API and see how they passed in the record. So I want to be able to retrieve a record, and you'll see that it actually says it's module and question mark, and they pass in some information. So I want my path vares to actually be record, and I want this one to be question. That's what I want. And let's go see if when I repair this, let's see if I can get that to work. So essentially what we're doing is we want to pass in some information instead of just get the ID. And if we can get that to pass in the correct information, then we'll be good on how we're trying to get some information. So hopefully this will work. But while that is rebuilding, inside of my code here, we actually, instead of just wanting the get message, we actually want to go into the code and go to add in the ability to get a message. So we're going to say, so we're going to add a function, get message detail. And in here, we're going to just use something simple. We're just going to say return, assign this service message. And in my message API, I have a get by ID function. I'm going to say get by ID. So I needed this function. And back in our send SMS, we're actually going to say, and we don't need the rest of this. So hopefully it's as simple as that. So in here, I got closer. I got a colon instead of what I was actually looking for. So let's see. It's actually, all right, one more try. So this is, what it's like to add an additional set of information. Please let me know if you got any questions at the current moment while this is rebuilding. All right, so let's go try this one more time. So part of this development right now is I am not writing anything back to the Sugar database. There's nothing that has occurred to Sugar. So now I have it set correctly. So it's /SMS:record. So when I come back over here, I want to take this ID and I'm going to create a new tab and I'm going to open up my REST console. So I just go over here, my REST console, and I don't need any options. And instead of that, we're going to do /SMS, and it is this. And we want this to be a get. And we need our header, which is our, go back over here, our OAuth token. And let's see if we can get this to work on the first try. Because I'm missing a parameter ID. Oh, so that was not exactly what I was trying to do. Let's go back to my code here. And let's go to, oops, let's try this, $, this, logger, fatal. Let's go put our messages into the log. Let's try this again. Let's see, I probably got an error. That's not correct, so let's try. So it doesn't have a logger. Let's try bubbles. Let's try that again. All right, so it actually showed up as record, not ID, so I actually want record because that was what I passed in my code. So we want record, record, and let's try this again. And I got some values, and let's try this. All right, so somewhere along the way, I've got an error, and let's see if my API, get message detail, message get by ID, I'm passing the ID. So any other questions? So since this is a live demonstration, and let's go make sure our test program works, send message, and we actually want, and we were doing message detail, message detail, and our question was this one. So we want the detail of, that. Let's see what happens if we just run this, make sure we get some detail. That's not correct. So we're getting an error that says can't get the service. Because service is spelled this. Okay, so now I got the correct data back. So let's go run this again. All right, so now I was able to get all of the information back into my API. So there's a number of points that you need to put together, where your API is going to go, what the functionality of your API is going to be, what external web services you're going to speak to, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to use it inside of the tool. So our next couple months, what we're going to do is we're going to add a dashlet that'll allow you on a contact or a lead to actually be able to send an SMS message, or be able to send an SMS template directly to the person that you are interested in sending to. I can also, like I said, send a large message. So let's go pick something off of, let's see if there's, Twitter's not a good example. Let's go look on, say, SugarCRM.com, see if there's any press releases that they have that have some information that would be interesting. There you go. Here's just some message. And let's just copy some information. And in my SMS message, I can paste all this. And so when it comes to my phone, what should happen, let's make sure there's no more these quotes. Let's see if I post this, see what happens. Somewhere I messed it up because I have too many quotes in here. So there's another quote. Let's see if that fixed it. Nope. So somewhere in here, again, I have too much information or too many quotes. I don't know where the quotes are. I'll take this out. So are there any questions that anybody has as it pertains to creating an API? Please let me know. Let's go see if we can paste that in 2 times, see if I can make my message big enough. There you go. My message should be plenty big. So it shows up as multiple messages. Nope, I guess that's the problem. I'm sending too big of a message. I would have to go back and Again, check. There is a limit to the number of characters. I think it's 1,000 characters. And maybe that's another thing that we need to test inside of our code to make sure we don't go over our limit. So again, let me know if you guys have questions. Otherwise, this is pretty much the end of our session for today. So please, let me know your thoughts, your comments, how you'd like to see things progress in the future. I appreciate your time today. Any other questions that anybody has? All right, again, thank you again for attending. We will have another session next month where we start putting it all together, and I look forward to hearing from everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye.